Hello, good evening. I finally made it this week. What a big, good week it's been. So, I hope you've had a good week too. Today, we are getting back into the mythical origin of the Egyptian temple by E.A.E. Reymond. And tonight, we are getting into part 2, the primeval world of the gods, chapter 5, the island of creation. All right, so let's do it again. The Edfu cosmogonical records begin with a picture of the primeval island where the gods were believed to have lived first. The way in which this world is described in the Edfu texts is, at present, unique, and no other similar series of texts is known. Some account of the aspect of this island has already been given in our summaries. It is, however, essential to repeat here the main features of the description preserved in our Edfu texts. The primeval world of the gods is represented by an IW island, which in part was covered with reeds and stood in darkness in the midst of the primeval water, which in this tradition bears the name Waret. Although none of the names of the island, such as Island of the Trampling, Island of Combat, and Island of Peace, shows any connection with the idea of creation, it is certain that this island was the piece of land where the creation of the world began, and the earliest mansions of the gods were founded. The origin of this island, however, is not described in our principal sources. The beginning of the first cosmogonical record seems to allude to a period of the primeval age in which the island was in existence and was occupied by some divine beings. There is nowhere in the main Edfu cosmogonical records any statement or allusion which would permit us to say how the Egyptians imagined that the earth or the actual land of the island was created. The creative activity, which had undoubtedly a prominent part in the period of creation with which the Edfu texts are concerned, is described as to endue with power the substances of the earth. This does not seem to deal with the initial creation of the earth, or specifically with the origin of the island, but as has been explained in a separate study, this creative activity appears to be concerned only with the origin of lands of special nature and significance. These lands then seem to represent the second period in the development of the primeval world of gods, as will be explained in greater detail below. To describe the Egyptian theory concerning the origin of the earth and the earliest configuration of the earth is a task which meets with difficulties. The question of the origin of the island mentioned in our sources, however, seems to be so important as to attempt to outline the Egyptian views on the beginnings of the terrestrial world. Naturally, there are frequent allusions to the creation of the world in the Egyptian religious texts, but these are all rather stereotyped and yield only marginal thoughts of the Egyptian cosmogony. Hey, Deanne. Hey, Luca. Hey, Sass. Welcome, everybody. Now, later, whenever. Welcome. Happy Friday. Happy whichever day it is. Wait a second. Is it Friday? Yeah, it's Friday. Naturally, there are frequent allusions to the creation of the world in the Egyptian religious texts, but these are all rather stereotyped and yield only marginal thoughts of the Egyptian cosmogony. Now I've got that one all confused because of that whole other way to say cosmogonical, but cosmogony. Another difficulty is the state of the sources. The general state of the extant sources of Egyptian cosmogony can rightly be described as dissecta membra. Dissecting membranes? Rightly be described as dissecta membra of what might once have been a complete cosmogonical doctrine. Scarcely do we come across texts which give a connected account of the successes of the successive phases of creation, or such texts as make it possible to reconstruct a rounded picture of the initial period in the existence of this world. Many of the cosmogonical documents are compositions written in a rather literary form, either on some deliberately chosen doctrinal themes or on some favorite mythological events. These then seem to aim at boasting the merits which the local god was believed to have had in the creation of the world. In this respect, reference, reference, or wait, in this respect, reference can be made to the three texts surviving from the Memphite doctrine of creation, such as the text preserved in the stone of Shabaka rather, Shabaka, the hymn to Ta in P. Berlin, 30,485, or a fragment of the Memphite philosophy known from P. Dem Berlin, 13603. These three documents present a somewhat generalized verbal picture of the creation of the world, but they are merely arbitrary compilations of traditions claiming a prominent role for Ta in the creation of the world. The text of the Shabaka stone gives a survey of Egyptian thoughts on the creation, but does not present an adequate picture of the elementary creation. Although emphasis is laid on the idea that the creator was an earth god from whom the world and all existed, rather, although emphasis is laid on the idea that the creator was an earth god from whom the world and all existing beings evolved, the process of creation interpreted does not, in fact, involve the creation of the earth itself. Nor is there any allusion to what was believed to have been the elementary form of the earth. The text tells us only that after the Creator had brought the world into existence in general by virtue of his thought and word, he then created the sacred domains and placed the gods in them. The same order of ideas is reflected in P. Berlin 3048. Ta, the earth god, is the eldest of the primeval deities. He is the Masenti, the lord of begetting, who created that which exists. Masenti. Where have I heard that? You love me, but maybe not. You gotta do it like you feel it, man. Masenti. Where have I heard that? P. Dem Berlin 13603 also shows. Oh, wait. Did I? No, I did. Okay. P. Dem Berlin 13603 also shows signs of being a dogmatic composition, although the existence of the world is interpreted as the work of Ta, who is the earth god. The document deliberately combines heli- heliop- heliopolitan and hermopolitan hermopolitan views on the creation of the world. It is stated that the earth and its divine inhabitants were created before Frey was born. Phre. Hey, I'm wearing the goddess Freya today, but that's spelled differently. Frey was born, but it is obvious that Heliopolis was regarded as the center of the creation. The primordial aspect of Heliopolis is not described. However, there is a clear allusion to the theory according to which Heliopolis existed before the earth was created. What a thought! You know, they found Heliopolis. Am I thinking of the right place? I think I am. It was like, I think, hmm, off the coast of Alexandria. It's so fascinating, all of the things that they pulled up and like all of the offerings and statues and writings and Heliopolis. Man, I'd like to check that out. From the primeval Heliopolis, so it is explained in our text, the earth god created the earth, which received the name Memphis. Thereafter, he proceeded to create living beings in the first place of gods. This document does not permit us to gain any fair idea of how the earth god was believed to proceed in the creation of the earth itself, nor is there any allusion to the appearance of the earliest terrestrial world in which the gods were believed to have first lived. On the other hand, an account of creation which is incorporated in P. Bremner Rind explains that when the creator came into being as Khopri, which is Khopri, on the first occasion, the existent things came into being. Then he made the primeval time and the primeval ones. This document seems to be concerned in particular with the origin of being and coming into existence, which was the work of the sole unique God, which was capitalized. Here again, however, nothing is said of the creation of the terrestrial world. On the contrary, P. Berlin 3047 tells us that the Creator, after he had revealed himself, created in the first place the ground to settle upon it the first occasion of his coming into being. The earth was then created, and everything was brought into existence. Combining the view contained in P. Bremner Rind with that of P. Berlin 3047, we may suggest that the Egyptians believed that after being, in general, was brought into existence, the Creator fashioned for himself a dwelling place in the midst of Nun, Nun, which is this tradition, or which in this tradition is described as, it's like an S, a squiggly line, a T, a squiggly line, and a W. And that from such a ground, he created the world. The same idea occurs in the creation myth, which is preserved in the text covering the second pylon of the temple Karnak, of the temple at Karnak. This myth refers to the original place of the creator, which is said to have emerged from Nun, and on which the creator settled in order to create the world. None of the texts mentioned, however, alludes to the process of the creation itself. None describes the fashioning of the ground. Oh, that's what that STW and the squigglies are. It means the ground, in which the tradition is described as ground. Okay. And its physical appearance. It looks as though the Egyptians were interested to record only the results of the creation. The interpretation of the causes of the creation does not seem to have been the real interest of their cosmological speculation. It may, very tentatively, be suggested that the elementary aspect of this primeval ground for the creation of the world might, perhaps, have been conceived as a mound which emerged from the primeval waters and assumed the function of the resting place of the creator of the world. This view can be supported by the Heliopolitan version of the myth of creation, which was formulated probably about the time of the Vith dynasty, which is just VTH, and which can in part be reconstructed from the pyramid texts. The earth in its earliest shape was pictured as a mound which emerged from the primeval water. This mound itself was then considered as a divine being and as the original terrestrial configuration on which the creator, Atum, dwelt, and from which he created the four elements represented as tangible divine beings. Closely related ideas are also reflected in the Hermopolitan doctrine of creation, in which the elementary terrestrial world is described as a mound upon which the sun god revealed himself. From all this evidence, we can conclude that the primeval mound, sometimes named Kai, sometimes Hai, was indeed regarded as the original nucleus of the world of the gods in the primeval age, from which this world was created. The way, however, in which the mound was fashioned is never stated in the process. It would consequently seem that, as has already been pointed out, the Egyptians conceived the original, or rather, the Egyptians conceived the origin of the earth as a mere emerging of the land from the primeval water, and that they believed that the appearance of the earth was caused by the revelation of the creation. The Egyptian cosmogony, then, as far as it can be judged from evidence that is Heliopolitan or partly Hermopolitan in origin, would seem to contain neither an interpretation of the causes, a description of the natural forces concurring in the creation of the earth, nor any adequate account of the appearance of the primeval world in which the gods were believed to have lived first. The analysis of the main Edfood cosmogonical records, however, seem to show ideas of the creation and of the primeval age which are unlike the generally known theory, a fact also suggested by the mythological situation described at the beginning of the first Edfu cosmogonical record. It is therefore important to mention here in certain allusions to mythical events which we can glean from Edfu inscriptions other than the main sources of our study. They seem to throw more light on the initial period of the primeval world of gods and on the mythological circumstances in which our creation story begins. We know from the Edfu texts that the Egyptians believed that the Earthmaker created the grounds for the domains of the gods, but exactly how he did how he did so is never stated. In the summary of the myth about the origin of the temple of the sun god, we come across a statement to the effect that the god's domain was created by virtue of the word of the Earthmaker. Since this view, however, is not contained in the main sources, and the Earthmaker, though mentioned there, takes part neither in the process of the creation of the earth nor in the origin of the grounds for the divine domains, it would consequently appear to be a derivative conception of a later date. A somewhat similar view on the origin of the earth occurs in the text of a scene of presenting libation and incense, to be found among the inscriptions on the walls of the forecourt of the Edfu temple. The god beneficiary is, of course, Horus the Betatite. He is equated with Tannin and is described as the god who created that which exists, father of the fathers, who created gods and men, the unique one without peer. He is said to be the snake who created the primeval ones, the august Sakhem who uplifted the sky, even the sky, for its disk, who created the earth, for him who issued from him, who first came into being when no existing being had yet come into being. This quotation seems to reveal a tradition according to which the first creative power, represented eventually as a snake, was believed to be the earth god. But surprisingly, the origin of the earth comes last in this order of creation. The text indicates the reason for which the earth was created. The earth God created it for his intimate offspring, his successor in the rulership over the mythical world. But here again, nothing is said of the process through which the earth as a substance was believed to have been brought into existence, and nothing is mentioned about the primeval shape of the earth upon which the successor of the earth god was to dwell. In connection with this tradition, it is appropriate to mention here that in the Edfu inscriptions, a deity called the first primeval one is twice equated with the great lotus and is said to have been, quote, he who caused the earth to be when he had come into existence in the past, the sole unique one without peer, who was first to fashion the earth upon his potter's wheel, who created men, gave birth to the gods, Lord of the universe, ruler of the primeval ones, the first primeval one who came into being before the primeval ones. And before I said potter's wheel, Potter's is in parentheses. I wonder if I mean, the wheel of fortune. I wonder why it's in parentheses. Is that the author's interjection or? Anyways, that's interesting. All right, I gotta take a sip. And welcome, everybody. Oh, yeah. Oh, man. This is my first hot tea of the day. It's so good. Where's my hat? I feel like I should have my hat on. It's raining out there. Man, the back and forth with the weather. It's like whiplash. Oh, man. Some of that went down the wrong tube. I'm going to cough 1 second. Oh, my. I snagged my hat, too, while I did that. Boop. All right. And to continue. So the potter's wheel. Interesting. I mean, that's still creation too, right? As I said that word creation, my eyes found the word creator over here on something that I wrote. That's cool. Okay. Okay, clear breathing. Off we go. Where am I? Potter's wheel. Okay. The idea of fashioning the earth on the potter's wheel is foreign to the ideological background of the main Edfu records. The creators of the earth acting in our creation story are never said to be the primeval ones, and there is no allusion to the fact that they were believed to participate in the creation of gods and other animate beings. It is likely that these statements also belong to the speculative theory of a later date. But one cannot deny that such views on creation, as are known from the theory of the late period, might be useful in tracing the development, of the ideas of the original creative powers who fashioned the elementary shape of the world of gods. We have seen that there is nowhere preserved a doctrinal document either of an earlier or later date which gives a full account of how the Earthmaker was believed to have proceeded in bringing the earth into existence. All the evidence known from the temple inscriptions is short texts telling us that the Earthmaker was the divine being who existed before the world and all other gods, and that he was the initiator of the existence of the world. The name IR-T squiggly line, however, appears to be somewhat arbitrary. We may hazard a guess that the Egyptians might have believed that the earth, as a substance, was created by a nameless and undefined power. This power, then, in the course of historical times, might have been imagined as a tangible deity. It may be surmised that perhaps the Heliopolitan doctrine concerning Atum was based on such an idea, and that, on the other hand, in the tradition which originated in another place, the same power was simply called Urt, because the earth was regarded as the essential outcome of his creative capacity. Hey, higher self. Hey, Mr. Hugh Parawitch. Libra, welcome in. KK, awesome to see you. And no caps. Everybody, welcome in. Wonderful. Greetings. Happy Friday. Happy weekend. Welcome. Nevertheless, the mention of the first primeval one in the text cited above is a clear allusion to the belief in an unspecified power that created the earth. It brings to mind yet another view of the creation of the earth, which is contained in the formula that accompanies a scene of offering the lotus, engraved on the outer wall of the Naos, capital Naos, of the Edfu temple. This ritual scene concerns the adoration of the primeval deities, who are said to be the, quote, gods who first came into being at the beginning, and all the beings came into existence after they had come into being, end quote. The text accompanying this ritual scene appears to preserve an aspect of Egyptian cosmogonical thought that is of interest and importance, but for which, at present, no parallel can be quoted. The words of invocation to these creative powers read, "Take to yourselves the lotus, which came into being at the beginning, and which drives away the storm cloud, even though it knows it not. You placed your seed into the bunt, which is BNNT, which you fertilized with your phallus, which you have plunged in noon, being united as one. May your air shine. May your air shine in the capacity of the stripling," and stripling is capitalized. Interesting. And the lotus is like NHB with like a little thing underneath it. Man, the lotus has been a recurring theme for me lately. Awesome. Okay. This text seems to imply a belief in the existence of a group of nameless deities who existed before the origin of the world, and who were believed to act as a single creating power. Here, and in some other Edfu texts, these powers are described as the primeval ones. The general definition of their nature, as having existed before everything else, shows close affinities with the descriptions of the earth god, the Urt, who is frequently, in the Edfu texts, and in some other late sources, equated with Tannin. If we agree that in these definitions there is rendered the Egyptian thought of how they conceived the nature of the creator, or creators, who produced the first and fundamental substance for the existence of the world, the earth, it would mean that the text accompanying the scene of offering the lotus, translated above, introduces us to the creators of the earth and reveals the original Egyptian conception of the nature of such a power. Since these deities were believed to act as a single creative power, it is not surprising that, on the basis of such a belief, the theory of the sole unique creator was elaborated in course of time. This sole creator might have been received varying, or rather, this sole creator might have then received varying names as might have been dictated by local traditions and beliefs. This secondary theory might in fact have prevailed, and thus we may venture to say that in the speculation of the historic period, the maker of the earth replaced the original creative powers. If this deduction be accepted, we may say, with all due reserve, that the Edfu text translated above shows that the first supernatural power to open the drama of creation was conceived in the Egyptian cosmogony as a multitude of nameless divine beings. A further deduction that can be made from this Edfu text is that the first act of creation, which the original powers were believed to have completed, would seem to be the fertilization of the bunt, which is BNNT. It is nowhere stated what exactly this BNNT was, and evidence is scanty. We can add from the Edfu inscriptions that it was believed that everything was brought out from the bunt by agency of the seed of Nun, which, in this tradition, is pictured as the lotus. Another allusion to the bunt occurs in the Theban myth of creation, preserved in the temple of Khonsu at Karnak. It is said of the bunt, quote, "It is the place in the Nun that, in which, question mark, it says in parentheses, fashioned the bunt on the first occasion." The word bunt, therefore, would seem to have been used in the Egyptian cosmogony to describe and define, or to describe a definite place within Nun in which a specific substance was formed by a process of creation which is not interpreted. This substance may also be called bunt, after the place in which it became solid matter. The BNNT seems to describe the place in which the mystic union between the primeval ones and Nun occurred. as well as the specific matter which filled that place, but which was inert. The latter, after having been fertilized, assumed creative powers and was capable of producing other substances. Since egg in the Edfu text is not employed in connection with the process of the creation described, and since, on the other hand, the original creating powers are at Edfu interpreted as being equal to the earth god, the earth maker, it is tempting to speculate on the significance of the action of creation described in the Edfu text. The bunt appears here to be the essential matter in the creation of the elements. It is therefore suggested that from this bunt, the most elemental terrestrial substances were believed to have evolved. In spite of the lack of other relevant sources, we incline to the opinion that the short Edfu text discussed in the course of our study may disclose not only a genuine view of the nature of the original creator, but also a true conception of the origin of the earth. It would follow that this bunt was regarded in the Egyptian cosmogony as the embryo of the earth, and that the Egyptians viewed the origin of the earth as the result of the union of an undefined male creating power with Nun, who would seem to play the role of the mother of the earth. The result of this union and the subsequent fertilization of the bunt embryo would seem to be the appearance of a piece of solid matter, which was thought to be the primary shape of the earth. The newborn earth might have been imagined as an island, which emerged from the primeval waters. Infinite waters. It's happy birthday, Ralph. Happy birthday, Anne. Happy birthday, anyone on the 3/3 day. This hypothesis seems to receive some support from the fact that the text of the scene of offering the lotus, which we discussed, refers indeed to an island, which appears to be the original nucleus of the world. Juicy. Solfeggio. Nice. Do, re, do, re, mi, fa, mi, re, do, re, mi, fa, so, fa, mi, re, do, right? Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, so, fa, mi, re, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, la, so, fa, mi, re, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, la, so, fa, mi, re, do, ti, ti, la, ti, do. Wow, I haven't done that since high school. All right. Oh, speaking of which, I helped my mom clean out this spare room last night, and we found a tape, like a cassette tape from my senior year. I don't have a player for it, but I have songs on there that I soloed. I'm excited to check it out. I want to listen. I have to dude, I was looking on Amazon and the interwebs for a cassette tape, like tape deck. $50. $50. What? Oh, shoot. Can you believe that? The cheapest one I found was $33.99. Good numbers. I'll probably buy that one. I don't know. Okay. Yeah, my high school best friend and I also did a duet, E.A.E. I really want to take a listen. I'll get there. Thanks, no caps. I didn't put a whole lot into that. It was kind of weak sauce, I thought. All right. The bunt. The nucleus of the world. The names of this island confirm the concept of the earth having been an island when it was first created. They appear to summarize doctrinal thoughts and traditions which the Egyptians may have connected with the original island of the primeval age. This island is described in our Edfu sources as this pool which came into existence at the beginning. And it is also called the province of the beginnings, or beginning, singular, of which an alternative name is the island of the egg. Hints of the theory according to which the Earth, in its primordial form, was imagined as an island floating in noon are already known. Nowhere, however, is anything said about how the Egyptians imagined that the Earth came to be. What were then the essential functions of the primeval island in the creation of the world, and what was the part of this island and what was the part this island played in the mythical sphere of the gods? From the analysis of the Edfu texts, it would appear as though the Egyptians believed that in order to effect the creation of the world, it was necessary to constitute a small piece of ground in the midst of the primeval water from which the natural forces would operate in the creation of the world. It appears as though the Edfu texts propound the theory that the primeval island bearing the name Island of the Egg acted as a real foundation ground existing before the world. This seems to be indicated also in a statement which we come across in the texts that accompany another scene of adoration of the original creative powers at the Edfu temple. These are the sages. They are said to have created a foundation ground which preceded the origin of any terrestrial configuration, even that of the primeval mound, the HY. This view finally finds support in the main Edfu cosmogonical records, as will be explained below. The ideas concerning the creation of the foundation ground existing before the world, pictured as an island, may well have been derived from a hitherto unknown myth of creation. There is clear evidence for assuming that at Edfu, extracts from a myth of creation, the main concern of which was precisely the interpretation of the origin of the earth and the explanation of the initial phase of the existence of this world, were used for the redaction of the spells accompanying the scenes of the offering the lotus. The study of these scenes enabled us to identify a good deal of the various extracts. They accord with and develop the ideas which we have discerned in the text already analyzed above, and permit us to follow the Egyptian theory concerning the development of the island of the egg in the initial period of its existence. In this respect, special reference should be made to a scene of offering the lotus, which is to be found in the forecourt of the Edfu temple. This is again the text to be recited at the performance of the rite of offering the lotus, but apparently it is another extract from the supposed cosmogonical document. Its content, is of outstanding interest because it illustrates what followed after the island of the egg had emerged from noon. We learn from this text that the first event to happen in this island was the creation of the form. The process of the creation of this physical form is not described in the text. Apparently, the primeval ones were believed to have created their physical appearance themselves, since they were regarded as self-created divine beings, quote, who begat themselves without father to fashion them, when there was no vulva to bring them into form, end quote. They are said to be the seed of their own creation. This belief seems to indicate that the primeval ones were thought to have acted first in a somewhat insubstantial form while creating the island. After the substance in general was brought into existence by the fertilization of the bunt matter, and had its manifestation in the emergence of the island, then it was possible for the primeval powers to undergo a metamorphosis and assume a physical form. The narration does not explain how the Egyptians imagined the primal physical embodiment of the first divine generation, but we are told that this played an important part in the subsequent stage of the creation. The following act of the creation occurring in the island is interpreted as the immediate result of the existence of this DT, which is the primeval, or which is the primal physical embodiment of the first divine generation. Oh, it says it next, anyways. The result of the existence of this DT, the bodily form of the primeval ones. And this event is described in the text of the scene of offering the lotus in the following terms. Juicy. Oh, no worries, dude. Welcome, welcome. Quote, take for yourselves that God who resides in this pool, or in his pool. Let's start again. Take for yourselves that God who resides in his pool. He was led from your embodiment, even the great lotus that issued from the pool in the island of the two flames, the province of the beginning, which initiated light ever since the first occasion on the high hill at the beginning of coming into existence. End quote. A closely related view of creation occurs in the next of another scene of offering the lotus to be found on the outer face of the enclosure wall. This text reads, quote, receive for thyself that God who resides in his pool, who initiated the radiance at the first occasion, even the great lotus that emerged from the pool in the island of the two flames, the province of the beginning. End quote. It follows that the island of the egg was believed to have been the place in which the natural forces, the primeval ones in our sources, lived, and after they had shaped their bodily appearance, performed other actions of the creation which caused the world to be. The second extract from the supposed myth of creation makes it clear that the primeval ones were believed to have been responsible for all the initial actions of the creation. Strictly speaking, they were the initiators of the elements, in particular the earth and radiance. The latter is said to have issued from their physical form. These beliefs are further illustrated by one of the spells in which these creating powers were addressed during their worship in the Edfu temple. Quote, the senior ones, who gave adoration to Re, who brought into being everything which had not yet come forth upon the edges of the high hill. End quote. The island of the egg was conceived. Then, as the actual spot of land in which the elements were created, after the radiance, the egg is said to have been created. The narrative does not say more about its nature. We venture to suggest that this SWHT, which means egg, may have been the embryo of the subsequent generation of gods and of the other animate beings. We have no doubt that all the spells cited from the ritual text of offering the lotus preserve, in part at least, the aspect of a hitherto unknown cosmogonical document. They are valuable as the sole texts which make us familiar with the Egyptian conception of the earliest terrestrial world. The first existent world of the gods started on what appeared to the Egyptians as a foundation ground, and which they were wont to describe as the island of the egg. The prominent feature of this island was a pool. No tradition seems to be connected with its origin. On the other hand, however, the island seems to have been extended by the creation of a mound. Both of the texts translated mention the Kai, or the K, which means high hill, but they do not explain its origin. Nevertheless, since the island and the hill appear to be closely connected in this drama of creation, we may hazard a guess that perhaps the hill might have been created in the same manner, and that this hill might have resulted from the creative activities of the same powers who created the island. It represented the second terrestrial configuration in the creation of the primeval world. This hypothesis agrees with the account of the creation completed by the sages, telling us that the primeval mound was a secondary creation subsequent to the origin of the foundation, and that it was the work of the same creating powers as those who fashioned the island. The Egyptians seem to have believed that both the island and the hill were of an earlier origin than the ground. Earlier origin than the ground. Another Edfu inscription referring to the creator reads, quote, thou hast led forth the mound when the ground had not yet existed, the primeval water still lying around, end quote. It appears that, after the ground was brought into existence, the creation of the primeval world was completed, and that in these grounds, probably, the gods were believed to have founded their first sacred abodes. At this stage ends the Edfu account of the order of creation in which the first terrestrial world, that of the gods, was believed to have been brought into existence. Surprisingly, none of these extracts allude to the creation of the sky, though the radiance is mentioned. I was wondering, is that what the radiance means? The sky? Thanks, Parawitch. Pearl! Good timing to look up. Welcome in. Awesome. Nowhere is there any mention of the astral creation. The lotus is said to have emitted the radiance, but the lotus issued from the body of the creators of the earth and remained within the pool of the island. It looks as though the Egyptians believed that during the first period of the island, the nucleus of the radiance remained on the ground, and that from the island the radiance illuminated the primeval waters. There appear, on the whole, affinities between the doctrine of creation in the Edfu texts and the Hermopolitan theory of creation. The Hermopolitan doctrine was based on the myth concerning an egg, which was believed to be the essential matter in the creation. The Hermopolitan doctrine also propounded the idea that the world, in its primal form, was an island that contained a pool within which Re was born. And this island was named the Island of the Two Flames. Twin flames. The view of the commencement of the world, which we have been outlining on the basis of the Edfu texts, might there have been essentially Hermopolitan in origin, or at least a theory adapted by and later propounded from Hermopolis. This suggestion can be supported by the Edfu records, since the primeval powers are in two instances identified with the Ogdoad. The ritual text describes the what does that word mean? The primeval powers, since in two substances, it's another word that I don't another language. The ritual text describes the P squiggly WTYR, but the deities presented are the Ogdoad. Moreover, the original island of the creation is described in three instances as the Pool of Hermopolis. From this point of view, the relationship with Hermopolitan ideas can in no way be denied, and the Hermopolitan version of the myth of creation might well have been used at Edfu for the redaction of texts accompanying the episodes of Offering the Lotus. We must admit, on the other hand, that nowhere in the Hermopolitan texts is the original island referred to as the Island of the Egg. It is described by the name Island of the Two Flames. Since the Edfu texts, however, show an alternative use of these two names while referring to the same land, it is possible that the name Island of the Two Flames was properly a Hermopolitan tradition, and that this name was given to the original island in connection with the belief that Re was born in it and emitted the radiance from his two flaming eyes. Seth, or Seth, S-E-T-H-E. I wonder how you say that. To beam, to shine, right? The sun. Thank you, No Caps. That's awesome. Seth, S-E-T-H-E, in his valuable account of the Egyptian cosmogony, emphasized the Heliopolitan doctrine and described it as the oldest one, deriving it from prehistoric times. The Heliopolitan idea was that noon existed before anything else, and that from this primeval water, the sun god rose to create the world. Seth admits that the Hermopolitan system was also of prehistoric origin, and that this system sets the Ogdoad in contrast to the monotheistic conception of the original creative power. They, after having taken origin in Noon, emerged to create the light and the primeval hill. But in these two doctrines, no explanation is given of the manner in which Atum or the Ogdoad created the primeval world. Equally important is the fact that none of the main Egyptian doctrines describes all the functions which the island of creation was believed to have had in the constitution of the primeval world of gods. In contrast, our Edfu texts explain the causes of the creation. When we compare in detail what is known of the Hermopolitan theory from the texts in Theban tombs, from the inscriptions of Petosiris. Damn, didn't I look that up? Inscriptions of Petosiris with the Edfu sources, differences appear. The latter disclose at some length a myth of creation which is of much earlier date. In our opinion, there may well have been a single myth about the origin of the island of creation which, though of unknown origin, might have been earlier in date than the time when the Hermopolitan and Heliopolitan doctrines were elaborated. We venture to suggest that there are, in the Edfu sources, concealed ideas that were used at a later date in the writing of myths of creation in various religious centers of historic Egypt. Two characteristic features of the Edfu myth are not prevalent in the Hermopolitan and Heliopolitan theories. Neither of them seems to have as its main concern the interpretation of the origin of the primary matter and the description of all the activities of the natural forces, represented as a group of nameless divine powers. It is evident that our Edfu sources agree with the common Egyptian ideas that Nun existed before everything else and that from Nun emerged the first creative power. The Edfu accounts attest a theory essentially naturalistic in conception, which sees the primary matter represented by two elements, water and earth, a belief which was certainly familiar to several primitive cultist places of the Thinite period, Thinite. The Edfu evidence asserts this view, but we are still uncertain of where the belief in natural forces was first made into a myth and then elaborated as a doctrine. As against the predominance of the Heliopolitan conception of the creation, our Edfu text shows that there was a theory that emphasized the creation of the substances. This idea is definitely foreign to the Heliopolitan and Hermopolitan doctrines. We see in the Edfu text decisive evidence for concluding that the main concern of the Edfu theory was the origin of the earth. The essential features of this theory are, therefore, that there was, at the beginning, a nameless creative power in the dark and empty space, and the bunt embryo in the primeval water. This embryo, or bunt, was regarded as the real and factual nucleus of the HPR, or coming into being, of the substances. After having been fertilized by the nameless creating powers, this bunt embryo produced the primal terrestrial substances, which formed the nucleus from which the world gradually developed. This foundation ground was pictured in the Egyptian cosmogony as an island, and was given names such as IW space SWHT, or rather, the island of the egg, or the province of the beginning. The emergence of the island, therefore, represented the first period of the primal creation. During its second phase, the DT, the primary physical form, took origin. This form was believed to be of divine nature and to represent the bodily shape of the first generation of the gods, the primeval ones. No accurate picture of their original appearance has been preserved. From the existence of this DT was derived the subsequent stage of creation, After the primeval mound came into existence, the lotus was created in which the radiance originated. The origin of the radiance is interpreted in our sources as that of the radiance element. From all the statements which we can glean in the Edfu texts, the fact emerges that the original substance had its manifestation in three physical forms: the island, the embodiment of divine nature, and the lotus that emitted the radiance. Another striking feature of this cosmogonical theory is the organic aspect of the creation. The origin of the elemental or rather, the origin of the elemental shape of the earth was conceived as the outcome of an organic and physical process. It derived from the competition of natural forces, which are represented by noon and the nameless power. These powers were imagined to be of a rather undefined appearance at the beginning of the creation. By way of contrast, this account does not include the explanation of how the astral corpus in general was created. It is true, astral corpus, astral body. I never heard, that's awesome. Where is it? The astral corpus in general was created. It is true that this theory embraces the explanation of the origin of some existing beings, but only such as might have been believed to be the direct outcome of the existence of the island of creation, or of the same process of creation through which the spot of creation was brought into existence. Therefore, the origin of the radiance is included in this theory because it was believed that the radiance issued from a substance which was created by the same natural forces as brought the island into existence. As a whole, the Edfu documents show a mode of approach to the phases of the primary creation, which is in many respects unlike the Hermopolitan, Heliopolitan, and also the Memphite systems. None of the three main Egyptian doctrines is concerned with the initial phase in the beginning of the world, nor do they give a detailed picture of the natural forces concurring in the drama of creation, as it can be discerned in the Edfu sources. Neither the Heliopolitan nor the Memphite doctrine differentiates the creation of the earth and radiance from the period in which the rest of the world was created. And this is undoubtedly one of the essential ideas that can be deduced from the Edfu cosmogonical records. In the Heliopolitan and in the Memphite theory, too, the creative powers and the elements appear as tangible and physical deities who bear specific names, whereas our Edfu texts stress the idea of nameless powers. This evidence is of value and is important for the probable date of this myth. It seems to indicate that the myth of creation that can be reconstructed from the Edfu evidence is based on beliefs from the time when the Egyptians adored only nameless natural forces. The fact that the deities acting in our drama of creation are not conceived as physical divine personalities and do not bear specific names is, in our opinion, evidence for assuming that at Edfu, in the texts accompanying the episodes of Offering the Lotus, there are enshrined fragments of the oldest conception of the origin of the earth. The order of creation, as described, appears logical and renders it likely that from this hitherto unknown myth of creation were derived the formative ideas of the main Egyptian cosmogonical doctrines. In spite of the lack of other relevant documents, we are inclined to conclude that the Edfu accounts of the original, or rather, that the Edfu accounts of the origin of the primeval island and of its function in the creation of the physical world of gods and men disclose genuine thoughts and beliefs of a remote date. Woo, that was chapter 5. Holy majoli. Let's see how long chapter 6 is, because I've been so busy at work and stuff that I hadn't gone live at all, and I have until the 14th to get through this book, and we're going to do it to it, man. Yeah, let's do chapter 6 next. The homeland of the primeval ones. This is juicy. I always confuse opus and corpus. Bummer. Yeah, they're totally different, right? That's funny. Oh my goodness, that's good. Okay. The Homeland of the Primeval Ones, Chapter 6. The attempt to investigate the Egyptian theory concerning the origin of the primeval island mentioned at the beginning of the first Edfu record led us far from the main purpose of our study. This was, however, necessary in order to clarify the background of the various traditions which the Egyptians seem to have connected with the beginnings of the earth. As will as will be seen below, these traditions are important in the mythological history of the Egyptian temple. This study enabled us to identify a number of short texts which, on close examination, appeared to be extracts from a rather extensive cosmogonical work which once might have been a complete myth about the island of creation, referred to as the island of the egg. What can be deduced from the Edfu texts has every appearance of a single theory which introduces us to a period which the Egyptians regarded as the early primeval age. This brings to mind the sacred book of the early primeval age of gods, mentioned in the Edfu inscriptions. The myth about the origin and functions of the island of the egg might well have been the contents of this sacred book. Probably this myth, in its complete form, constituted one of the biggest portions of the original version of the sacred book. The main contribution of the short cosmogonical records at Edfu is that they acquaint us with the primeval island, which seems to have played an important part in the constitution of the sacred domains. Using all the textual evidence, which we have translated and discussed in part in the course of our study, we may attempt to reconstruct the mythological situation of the island of the egg. The idea inherent in our myth is that a muddy island that emerged from the primeval water by virtue of the activities of the nameless creative power constituted the foundation ground for their own domain. They seem to have created the actual land for their realm. In the first period of its existence, the island of the egg was closely associated with the divine generation of the primeval ones. These nameless creators of the earth seem to have been regarded as its original inhabitants, who lived in it at first in a somewhat insubstantial form. The Edfu texts, in addition to the accounts concerning the origin of the island, give a fairly clear idea of how the Egyptians conceived the characteristics of the original creative powers. We suspect that the texts which were used at Edfu to define the nature of the gods of historical times were originally parts of an extensive doctrinal document of an early date. We incline to the opinion that the sacred book of the early primeval age of gods might have included also the descriptions of the divine beings who were believed to be the first to live in the island before light and radiance were created. These shapeless creative powers were regarded as a generation of gods who were older than the NTRW gods. They are described as the most aged ones and are said to be the first generation of Mesenti. Oh, I think I know where I've heard that word before. It's from I heard it on a movie. Um yeah, Mesenti. Um shoot, what's this movie's called? I loved them. They're set in Egypt. Damn, I'm really doing a bad job of explaining this right now. I can't remember the name of any of the actors. Balls. Mesenti. Balls. I can't remember the name of the movie, but at least I remembered where I heard it from. Who this Mesenti is not certain, for we know him mainly from the Edfu texts. There is no authority to explain the nature of this god. It is only a guess to say that he might have been an earth god. In these instances, we have probably a view deriving from the speculative theory of a later date, because, on the other hand, it is known that these PWTYR, or aged gods, the most aged ones. Is that what they are? I might have said that wrong. Yeah, that's not that. Okay. It is known that these PWTYW were believed to be self engendered, who begat themselves without father and mother, and were the seed of their own creation. Where is that, though? Oh, PWT, no. Macenti, no. Balls. PWT. It is known that these okay, wait, the Earth God? Earth God. PWTYW. 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 Dude, we've already came across that, but it's the primeval ones. PWTYW. It's the primeval ones. Okay. So, okay. In these instances, we have probably a view deriving from the speculative theory of a later date, because, on the other hand, it is known that these primeval ones were believed to be self-engendered, who begat themselves without father and mother, and were the seed of their own creation. Primeval ones. The text of another ritual scene referring to their cult at Edfu speaks of them as of, quote, the fathers who fertilized, the mothers who gave birth, the ones who were first to beget and to create the egg, the bulls who impregnated, the cows who conceived, the builder gods who fashioned in the primeval time, the lords of the light, the makers of the radiance and sunlight, who were first to illuminate and to give the light, who begat themselves without father, to give shape to them when there was no vulva to bring them into existence, the children of Tannin, who created Re, and the generation of the great shining one. End quote. Dang. A closely related account of the nature of the primeval powers is to be found in a text engraved on the wall of the forecourt, and reads, quote, the powers who created everything, the progeny of Tannin, the children of Macenti, the august Kas, Kas, who created the PN God, in parentheses question mark, and the commencement, the fathers of the fathers, the creators of the radiant God, the ghosts, the ancestors whom the noon created, and raised, or who raised the seed for gods and men, the male gods who created sexual pleasure, the females who bore forth the egg that fertilized them, the bulls who impregnated, the cows who conceived, the Kas, the senior ones, who came into being at the beginning, who illuminated this land when they came forth unitedly, who created the radiance by the work of their hands, end quote. They are also described as, quote, the great E.A.E, who brought into being the forms, who caused the gods to be, who gave birth to the primeval ones, the self-engendered ones, who equipped the two lands in their names, and by every form they wished, the fathers of the fathers, who came into being at the beginning, the mothers of the mothers, who were born since the primeval time, whose bodily forms were divinized in the mounds of the lands, the beneficent gods, who first came into being at the dawn of time. They came into being before any existing being came into existence. They created themselves and issued from themselves. The progenitors who begat themselves, the builder gods, the senior ones who fashioned in the beginning and who created all things, the sanctified ghosts beyond compare, whose cause, KAS, are the primeval ones, the ghosts, the sanctified ones, who came into being on the first occasion, the ones who created their own bodily form for themselves, who fashioned themselves as their own work, the ones who created their embodiments, who were begotten at the beginning, who came into being before the existing beings had come into being, who were produced in their bodily form, though their nature had not yet been shaped, the most powerful of the powers, who created the builder gods, the most aged ones, the progenitors and mother of the mothers who gave birth. There are no gods like unto them. They are the senior ones of the gods, and the males without female among them, who came into being at the beginning, who were born at the commencement, the most aged ones of the primeval time, end quote. It may be noticed, it may be noticed that in this long series of quotations, the deities who were believed to have opened the drama of creation are never referred to as single individual divine beings, and that they are not described as physically real deities. In all these instances, they are addressed as a group of divine beings. If we decide for the theory that these spells of invocation were made in accordance with a document of earlier date, it will follow that in the Egyptian cosmogony, the creation of the earth and radiance was not conceived as a sole, unique God. On the contrary, the Egyptians seem to have believed that the primary matter was created by a group of nameless and insubstantial divine powers. A further deduction that can be made from these texts is that the primeval embodiment was not regarded as having a definite and specific appearance. At one point, however, we notice a difference between the descriptions of the primeval ones. In the texts interpreting the origin of the island of creation, the primeval creative powers are said to be a single male power, but on several occasions, the descriptions refer to different sexes. It has been pointed out that there are definite hints that in the beginning, these primeval powers lived in the island in a somewhat insubstantial form, and this view can be developed by the statements that they existed before any other being and were produced in their physical form when their nature had not yet been shaped. This, however, neither explains nor agrees with the idea that their primary appearance was that of bulls or cows. The allusion to bulls and cows indeed does not fit in with the idea of the origin of the radiance. Yet the clear implication of the text is that the first physical form of the original divine beings, the DT, was self-created and was imagined as being that of a bull or cow. Consequently, this was the primary form in which the original creators emerged from noon. Are we talking about like the age of Taurus? There's things that I confuse too. I love that you said that. There is no authority to confirm the idea that the form of the bulls and cows was conceived to be the original appearance of the primeval DT, the physical body. Wait, did I just read all that? No, the physical body of the primeval ones. It may very tentatively be suggested that this view might have been a secondary one and derived from the fact that these primeval powers were believed to have initiated procreation and fertility in general. We incline to the opinion that the descriptions of the characteristics of the primeval ones, that PWTOYW, such as are preserved at Edfu, combine views on the nature of two distinct generations of gods. Since we can quote in these texts the use of names such as the most aged ones and the early primeval ones, and descriptions such as ghosts and ancestors whom Nun created, it is possible that the Egyptians believed that in the beginning of the world, there were two generations of creators distinct in their physical appearance and nature. Evidence in support of this explanation is found in the theory preserved in P. Berlin 13603. There it is stated that, in the first place, there was the earth god who created the four couples of bulls and cows. This text is undoubtedly a deliberate compilation of doctrinal views and certainly made at a later date, but seems to allude to the same trends of thought of which the Edfu texts might reveal a somewhat earlier expression. In our opinion, the Edfu texts reveal the ideological background on which was based the theory prevailing in all the main cosmogonical doctrines of ancient Egypt. There are also in our sources hints of a theory according to which there was a long period between the emergence of the island and the creation of the rest of the world, a period during which life was believed to have been developed within the island. The Egyptians imagined that after the phases of the primary creation were completed, these primeval ones lived in it, in the vicinity of the pool containing the lotus, and continued their creative task. The nameless creative powers seem to have founded their home on the island. Their resting place, however, is portrayed as of the most primitive appearance, the bare edges of the pool. The Egyptians regarded this home of the creators as a sacred domain and believed that its existence represented a definite stage in the mythological history of the Egyptian sacred places. The time span of this home of the primeval ones, we may anticipate, appears to be limited and ended in the darkness. The first event that was believed to have occurred in this home seems to have been the bringing into existence of the form. We suspect that this statement alludes to the origin of the subsequent generation of gods, who are in our sources described as the cause of the primeval ones, KAS, or the generation of the great shining one. The Egyptian idea evidently was that the island of the egg housed two generations of creators during the first period of its existence. The latter were born in the island only after the first phases of the creation in general were fulfilled. In accepting this view, we may suggest that the island of the egg, the original domain of the most aged ones, was the birthplace of the succeeding generation of creators. It was their homeland, or Hin, Hin. It was their homeland. This interpretation can be supported by textual evidence in which the word Hin applies to the Waret, probably to a part of this Waret. One of the Edfu texts discloses the view that the new generation of creators were born in the water of this Waret, from where they came to the land. Since at this stage of the primeval age, the only solid land was the island, we suspect that the mention of the T land refers to the actual island of the creation. In another tradition, the word Hin, or homeland, seems to describe that part of the island in which was the pool, from which the new divine generation emerged after the creation of the radiance. The tradition regarded this Hin, the birthplace of the creators, as the most sacred part in the first primeval domain of the gods. The primary appearance of the second generation of the creators is described as that of cause, which real form which real form this name denotes cannot be defined. Our sources seem to indicate, however, that these Kas, Kas, might have been equated with the bulls and cows at a very early date. It is doubtful, on the other hand, whether this conception was general. It may be suggested that the original form of the cause might have been conceived differently in the various local traditions and beliefs. These modifications could have resulted from the conception of the nature of the creative task which they were believed to complete, and might have been affected by the equation of these original cause with local deities. In the Hermopolitan doctrine, we find the Ogdoad linked with these primeval cause, frequently described as the PWTYR, which is the primeval ones, right? Is that what we said? I think so. At Memphis, on the other hand, the Shebtu and the sages seem to have the same rank. That's cool. I wondered about that. They are said to be the children of Tannin and the progeny of the creator. There are also reasonable grounds for assuming that these Kas replaced the shapeless creators of the earth and the radiance. These latter seem to have continued the work of creation primarily by extending the original island and creating the rest of the world. It was perhaps believed that the creative capacity of the most aged ones had ceased when the new generation of the creators appeared on the scene. The original natural forces, though present in the island of the egg, do not seem to be longer active. Yeah, that's what it says. According to the Hermopolitan version of the doctrine of creation, the era of the second generation of creators begins with the birth of the sun god, who is said to have been created in the pool of the primeval island. One of the Edfu texts reveals that they were the fathers and the mothers of the august stripling, 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 and that they created him to complete their number as the 10th god. Since, however, the radiance was already in existence, two interpretations of this event are possible. Either the primeval ones were believed to give to the radiance element the form of a god, or we hear HERE, or we here come across evidence of a modified version of the original myth. It is possible that the view according to which the origin of the radiance was interpreted as the birth of the sun god was properly the Hermopolitan tradition. As far as one can judge this event from the Edfu evidence, it is certain that the birth of the sun god replaces the origin of the radiance only in text in which the original pool is equated with the sacred pool of Hermopolis. And the primeval powers are identified with the Ogdoad. In these texts, also the original island is named the Island of the Two Flames. As has already been pointed out above, the difference of the names which the islands was given renders it probable that the Hermopolitan myth about the birth of the sun god was based on an earlier tradition. We find in several Edfu texts that the origin of the radiance was interpreted as the birth of the sun god within the lotus. We read in the invocation formula of one of the Edfu scenes of offering the lotus, quote, "This august god, who came into being in the great pool and was led forth from noon within the lotus," end quote. In the Hermopolitan tradition, the sun god, after having emerged from noon, assumed the power of creating this world and the gods and the mankind. It was believed that, quote, "when he, the sun god, opened his eyes, he had illuminated the two lands. He divided the night from the day. The gods issued from his mouth and men from his eyes. everything attains being in him. End quote. In an inscription engraved on the inner face of the enclosure wall, another extract from a similar doctrinal writing is incorporated and illustrates this view in the following words, quote, "When the egg was created, they, or the two participating deities, in parentheses, they opened its interior with the lotus, and Re, as stripling, was between the two mistresses, his embodiment as Khopri, Ta, who initiated his creation. The slumber shall pass away when the light comes forth from him, even the child. He burnt everything in its surroundings by his two flaming eyes from the island of the two flames." End quote. Wow. Hey, Esoteric Alchemist, welcome in, dude. Thank you, Mr. Hugh. It's juicy. It's so interesting, right? The same text propounds the idea that the sun god succeeded to the throne of the eldest ones, and his father handed to him the decree to create mankind, the gods, and all animate beings. When we recall the tradition concerning the Hin or homeland, the throne of the eldest ones of the Hermopolitan tradition appears to be very like it. It follows that we have here another allusion to the belief that creative powers were transferred from one generation of creators to another, and that here also, the birthplace of the new generation of creators in the Hermopolitan doctrine, the birthplace of the sun god, was regarded as the center from which all the acts of creation were believed to have started. In this interesting, or rather, it is interesting that the terrestrial world is said to have been created last in the order of creation. Here again, no description is given of the process of the creation of the earth substance, but the brief account refers only to the appearance of the earth from the primeval waters. This text is one of the rare pieces of evidence in the present state of our knowledge which tells us how the Egyptians imagined the way in which the earth was created to emerge from noon. Or rather, I missed a word. I said a word wrong there. This text is one of the rare pieces of evidence in the present state of our knowledge which tells us how the Egyptians imagined the way in which the earth was caused to emerge from noon. By virtue of the radiance of the sun god, who was believed to dry up the water around his primeval seat, it would follow that in the Hermopolitan doctrine, the creation of the terrestrial world was conceived as a mere emergence of the earth, and that this process was the result of the activities of the solar energy. Kemet. Yeah, dude. Alchemet. Yeah. Alchemy. The land of chemistry. It's like dessert drink. It's so good. So solar energy, right? It is important, on the other hand, that the sun god was believed to operate from his birthplace, which was also the place of origin of the cause, his creators. Every time I say that, I hear C-A-U-S-E, but it's not. It's always capital K and then A-S, cause. This short text, therefore, furnishes an additional argument to support our hypothesis concerning the foundation ground as a prerequisite for the creation of the world. It confirms, too, that this Hin, or homeland, in essence, the pool with the lotus, the very spot of the creation within the island, was conceived as being the most sacred part of the primeval domain of gods. This Hin, homeland, has every appearance of being the private domain of the sun god, since it is described as his throne. It may be that the theory concerning the primeval throne of the god was the distinctively Hermopolitan tradition, because this view is known only from that part of the myth about the primeval island which reveals stronger Hermopolitan influence. Ooh, excuse me, I felt that. We can add that the Ogdoad themselves were described as the rulers of the throne of the primeval ones. Another text tells us that this primeval throne was indeed imagined as the lotus in which the sun god was believed to rest. It follows that it was believed that in the primeval ones, the early primeval age, the first sacred domain of gods came into existence in the island of the egg, and that the creator of the world and all animate beings, the sun god in our myth, shared the primeval sacred domain with other and earlier creating powers. In its essential nature, this primeval sacred domain was the very place from which the radiance issued first, in which the primeval ones were initiated, in which also their successors was born and assumed the power to create the rest of the world. Since this place is found described by the word NST, throne, it is highly probable that the Egyptians imagined it as a real, though primitive, sacred place. The Egyptians probably imagined that in the center of this domain or homeland, there was the lotus as the first seat of the creator of the world. Assembled around this spot, there were the two earlier generations of the creators, the nameless powers with their cause. It is quite evident that the Egyptians did not imagine the place in which the creation was effected as a place in which the omnipotent, it's on two lines, in which the omnipotent creator would reign alone. On the contrary, he was brought out of noon by a pre-existing creative power and lived in the island with other divine beings who performed the actual work of creation, probably at his command. The evidence quoted in the texts of the scenes of offering the lotus, and in some connection, or in some connected inscriptions, seems to preserve quite a coherent picture of the homeland of the primeval deities in the island of creation. This conception of the appearance of the primeval homeland, might have been a realistic background. It seems to reflect the appearance of a very primitive sacred place as it might once have existed in the dim past of prehistoric Egypt. The remarkable fact which emerges from the Edfu accounts is, therefore, the association of the primitive cultist place with the conception of the initial spot of Earth in which this world began to exist. In this creation story, we can follow a connected line of acts of creation which are described as mythical events, and which at a definite moment of the primeval age resulted in the creation of the sacred domain of the creator. In deciding in favor of the theory concerning the cultist place of the creator, it may be suggested that the belief of the existence of the creator's sacred place may well have been familiar to several sacred domains that existed in the early stages of Egyptian history. This belief might have been common to sacred places of proto-dynastic Egypt. Each of them would claim for itself the honor of being the original island in which the first sacred realm had been created, in which the world of men took its origin, but each would introduce such modifications as might have been dictated by local legends and beliefs. We can refer to other texts acquainting us with interpretations of the original world of the gods, and which were certainly formulated in places other than Hermopolis. It is true that none of them contains as detailed a description of the origin and aspects of the initial island as can be found in our Edfu sources. The major thought in all of them, however, is the same. There was at the beginning of the world an island in which the first sacred domain was constructed. This thought is apparent in the Heracleopolitan version of the myth of creation. Heracleopolis claimed for itself to have been Maybe I said that right. I've heard it Heracles, Hercules, Heracleopolis. Heracleopolis. That's kind of fun. It's kind of hard. Heracleopolis. You guys should say it. Heracleopolis. It's super fun. Claimed for itself to have been the original place where the creator first came to land. Heracleopolis was the primeval land in which the creator made his dwelling place, from which he created the world thereafter. The same mythological situation can be found described in the Theban versions of the creation myth, to which we have only briefly referred above. The narrative preserved in the Theban temple does not speak of an island, but of a original place, or the place of the primeval time, which emerged from noon and became the center of the creation of the world. We are told that in this primeval land, the creator revealed himself, and from his resting place, he then created other lands to settle the gods there, and thus the world of the gods came into existence. Thereafter, the creator proceeded to create other animate beings. We have no doubt that in the background of these explanations concerning the origin and the functions of the primeval realm of the gods, as they are known from the Hermopolitan and Hercle- Her- Heracleop- balls, Heracleop, Herac, bollocks. I just said it pretty well. Heracleopolitan, and Theban texts. Okay, so Hermopolitan, Heracleopolitan, and Theban texts. There were the same trends of thought. The original place is only another name of the primeval island in our tradition. Thus it may be suggested that the island mentioned at the beginning of the first Edfu cosmogonical record was really equivalent with the original island of the egg, though, in fact, it bore a different name and is never equated with it. This island, so far as the Edfu tradition is concerned, is named Island of the Trampling, and was believed to have been occupied also by some divine beings before the process of creation of the lands, as far as this myth is concerned, began. In view of all these affinities, there was, in all probability, a belief in the existence of one sole primeval island, which was regarded as the center of creation, and which received varying names according to the local traditions. These names might have been derived from or affected by other myths and traditions connected with the original island in various places in the course of time. Although the early Although the early time span of the island of Trampling is not included in the part of the myth that survives on the wall of the temple at Edfu, it is tempting to speculate and to suggest that this island was believed to have been, brought into existence by the same primeval powers, and by the same process of creation as the island of the egg. The analysis of the first Edfu record shows that the island of the egg and the island at Edfu are very similar in their physical appearance and their nature. Boom. Chrono Trigger. It is a mouthful. Interesting. Thank you, Esoteric Alchemist. And that was chapter 6. Dang, right? We're doing pretty good. I don't know if I'm going to get into 7 or not. I think I'm going to leave 7 for tomorrow. Yeah, we will do 7 tomorrow. We're going to call it. It's been an hour and 40 minutes. So juicy. So juicy. Thanks for hanging out with me tonight, everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful week. Yeah, spring is around the corner. And like every other day, it feels like spring here right now. It's crazy. So dang. Yeah, I appreciate you. I hope you're doing well. And I'm determined to get after this. So I'll be here tomorrow reading more of this book. And we'll get through it. because it's too juicy and I got to take it back. I can't just have it in my library forever, right? Which I wish I could. Yeah. So thank you, everyone. I totally appreciate you. I hope you're taking care of yourself and your people, holding it down in your corners of the world. And thank you, YouTube. Thank you, StreamYard. Thank you, everyone. I love you. And I will see you next time. Mwah. Take care. You guys too.